One of the reoccurring themes in fantasy creature design is an out-of-place biology, where we take a creature from one environment and transpose it onto an entirely unexpected one, subverting expectations and creating a fun interplay of the familiar and the weird. This is one of my favourite categories of creatures. They're technically monsters, but in the reality of the fantasy world, they're just natural beasts that would be no more out of place for them as encountering a rhinoceros is for us. Well, if we were in a place where one might expect to find a rhino, not downtown Chicago or Gothenburg. In the derailed fantasy adventure titled The Lizard Wizard's Wish, we visit a rocky bluff with a beechwood forest thriving there. In this coastal terrain, there are a few creatures that we would normally find in coastal waters, particularly tide pools found on rocky shores, the hermit crab and the sea anemone. Hermit crabs can survive out of the water for a little while. Some species of crabs can move around on land quite well for extended periods and grow to a fairly large size, so it's not too far-fetched to imagine a fantasy version of a hermit crab that outgrows all the largest seashells and takes to hiding inside hollowed-out rocks instead, storing enough water inside the space to remain on land for a very long time and growing to a huge size. A real giant of a hermit crab with a rock the size of a boulder it drags around, feeding on all sorts of vegetation, particularly seeds, nuts, roots, and wildflowers, but an opportunistic feeder that will sample just about anything it finds. Not very aggressive, but more likely to tuck itself inside its shell and roll over so the boulder covers it as much as possible. If pestered, it does have a nasty set of pincers that can snip into flesh, at worst perhaps sever a finger or slice a tendon. Crab meat is often edible and quite tasty, so it might be considered a delicacy in areas where it can be more commonly found. They would be very slow to grow to such a large size, and you would find many hollowed out rocks they leave behind as they outgrow old homes. The younger crabs often stealing good stones from each other. Giant hermit crabs would stay closer to permanent rock pools on the coastline, as these are preferred rest stops and a location they find ideal for breeding and leaving clusters of eggs after the female carries them within her for about a month. The eggs hatch quickly when exposed to the salt water in the tide pools. I should add this is unlike the 1,000 or so normal species of the sea or land-dwelling hermit crabs, who all disperse their eggs to immediately hatch in the shore of the sea, not in tide pools. The hatchlings are called zoea and often go through 4 to 6 growth stages over the next 40 to 60 days until it becomes a megalupa, a mini version of the adult form which lasts around another month, and this is where it starts looking for its first tiny shell or pebble to tuck itself into and become a hermit crab. This is where the giant hermit crab slowly transforms its gills into a set of lungs and loses the ability to breathe water. So even in the tide pools, the adults don't stay under the water all the time. They need to come up and breathe now and then. As they grow, giant hermit crabs will constantly go through cycles where they dig a deep burrow and hibernate inside to start the molting process, as they need to do this in complete darkness, undisturbed, and it takes a lot of energy out of them to do this. It can take several months to molt out of an exoskeleton and into a new one, and they do it at least once a year, and they need to find or carve out new rock homes each time they do it. Giant hermit crabs can live at least 40 years, so there will almost likely be a lot of such rocks found in the area they live, and will prefer environments that don't get too cold. A steamy geothermal pond could be an ideal place to find a small population of truly enormous hermit crabs. One last note, they can regrow lost limbs during the molting process, and you can tell they're getting close to the molting cycle when their exoskeleton, particularly their eyes, go a grey, milky colour. Another species are the anemones. These are just as likely to be found in tidal rock pools, but finding them existing outside of water entirely is the realm of fantasy. Most sea anemones are made up of a base and an oral disc surrounded by tentacles. The base is the stalk that connects the animal to a rock or other surface. The oral disc is the sea anemone's version of a face. It has a flat surface with a mouth in the middle and a prey-catching tentacles around the edges. The largest of the over 1,000 species on Earth can reach 3.3 feet or just over a meter in diameter, but in the fantasy world, we can grow them to truly enormous sizes. Let's not forget the almighty Sarlacc from Star Wars, although that relative to the Rathtars is actually a sort of cephalopod, I think. In the ocean, anemones can reproduce sexually, with eggs released into the water. But on land, this would be a more difficult prospect for a mostly stationary animal. Luckily, the anemone can reproduce asexually by dividing off a part of itself to create a clone offspring. This might result in an area that provides plenty of food and favourable safe conditions for the anemones to form a thriving colony, all looking exactly like each other. Fungal forests of the subterranean realms and deep cavern systems that are quite tropical and very humid would be a likely spot for a fairly dangerous grove of the stinging anemones. Oh, and what a nasty sting these things have. If you're not familiar with the jellyfish and other Cnidaria species, they're equipped with stinging cells that are like tiny harpoon weapons, firing toxin-laced filaments with wicked barbs at high speed into the flesh of their victims on contact, resulting in excruciating and often paralyzing injury. The anemone cytotoxic proteins are very nasty. They cause cell membranes and blood corpuscles to leak uncontrollably, so you get severe skin ulcers, acute kidney damage, renal failure. The pain of these stings is infamous. One species is locally known as the wasp anemone. Another is known as the hell's fire anemone. Land-based anemone would most likely develop venoms that are much more effective against land-based prey, so humanoids would certainly be at risk of pretty nasty stings that could take weeks to recover from and leave long-lasting scars. Many of these creatures form symbiotic relationships with other creatures, and they may cultivate dinoflagellates inside their own cells. Sea anemones have clownfish and shrimp living with them. There's no reason why some sort of insect or even small animals couldn't develop some sort of relationship of mutual gain as well. Creatures that help keep them clean, perhaps help bury them a little bit. Could be the hermit crabs even. Dinoflagellates can be photosynthetic. They can also ingest small prey, and some species are bioluminescent, gleaming with a blue-green light. So it's possible you could stumble into a great underground cavern just packed with glowing fungus, cave ponds, and cave anemones all over the place. That's about it for now. I'm working on the next derailed fantasy adventure titled The Fire Pits of Draken Peak. We shall see many more random beast encounters such as lava sharks, volcano bears, caldera capybara, some salamanders of course, a bit more on the alternative version of giants and whatever land the adventures are taking place in, and hopefully I can make some more videos like this for you. If you like this sort of content, let me know. Like, subscribe if you haven't already, give me a comment down below, and as always, thanks for listening. My name's AJ Pickett. I'll be back with more for you very soon.